place in Cape Town on the 18th of April. Amongst other things, a fire destroyed a part of the University of Cape Town's library. And due to the many reactions we received at ZAM that expressed worry, we figured it would be right to create a space in which we can discuss the realities at hand, share thoughts on it, and get insight in what way or form it's possible to contribute to the mission of restoring what has been damaged and or lost. So with that being said, let's dive straight into the program. And this afternoon, we have in our midst our very own Laurens Nijsink, who is a journalist, anthropologist, and project coordinator at Bureau Africa. And today he's going to moderate a conversation with our special guest, Dr. Divine Fu. So I'll just cut it short and hand it straight over to Laurens.
Yes.
Welcome. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Stephanie. Stephanie is relatively new at ZAM, but already indispensable to the organization. You know, I think every small organization like ZAM needs a Stephanie to keep this ship on course and afloat. So, okay, back to the UCT fires. Indeed, we're glad and honored to have Dr. Divine Fu with us, live from Cape Town. Divine Fu was born and raised in Cameroon in 2009. He earned his PhD in social anthropology at the University of Basel, Switzerland. And in 2012, Divine came to UCT to take the position of senior lecturer in anthropology. And since 2020, he is director of HUMA, the Institute for Humanities in Africa, also at UCT. Fu has been a visiting fellow at several universities, among others, the African Studies Center here in Leiden. And next to all this, he is also the founding managing editor of Langa, Research and Publishing in Cameroon, and former chair of the Council of Management of the African Book Collective. So there's clearly a love for the printed word, I would say. Okay, about this session. We will have a short conversation with Divine Fu about how he experienced the fire, what the destruction means for him and the academic community, and also what this means for the wider academic and maybe non-academic community. And after this conversation, there will be ample room for questions for Dr. Fu, as well as for remarks and reflections from you, the audience. Okay. So now it's been indeed 8 days ago that the fire started and damaged UCT's upper campus and the African Studies Library. Divine, I would like to take you back to that day, to the moment you heard about the fire. How did you hear about it and what was your first reaction?
So thank you very much, Laurens and Stephanie and colleagues for inviting me to speak with you and your audience. And also thank you, friends and colleagues, you know, for joining the discussion. I was going to start with a number of disclaimers, Laurens. First, that I am not an archivist, so that's really important. I'm not an archivist. I'm not a historian, and I do not work in the library, so that's very important. And when the fire started, I was not in the library or at the library, so that's really important. Secondly, it's also that, you know, when you come from a place where fires seem to be a part of daily life, you know, these fires also become very political, and discussions around fires are in themselves politics and political. So we often try to stay off or stay away from engaging in these conversations, just in case you begin to politic. So part of the reason why I'm here is because I like to define myself as a very obedient young man who listens to their elders. So when you have a Miriam De Bruyne and a Francis Nyamjo who say you must speak, you have no choice but to speak. So that's very important. That I like to say I respect my elders. So I'm here to speak because I respect my elders very well. So when this fire happened, I mean, on the 18th of April, that Sunday last week, 8 days ago, I was actually at home. I think everybody knows where Cape Town is, which is one of the Cape Town is seen as one of the wonders of the world, and Table Mountain is, I think, one of the 8 wonders of the world, and it's a touristic destination, and we like to say it's one of the most beautiful places on earth. And UCT, which caught some of this fire, or which whose campus partly caught fire during this, also the top university on the continent, one of the top in the world, and has been voted many times one of the most beautiful campuses on the world globally. So that's, I think, important to foreground. Whatever we think about these measures is another thing, but these measures are here. So when these fires happened, I was at my home, which is far. I used to live near campus in Rondebosch, but I got tired of going into the supermarket and having to meet my students whom I met in class again, having to go do my hair or see the dentist and having to meet my students again. There has to be some break, from work, and life. So I decided with my family to move far away from the campus. So I live in a area called Musenberg, which is close to the sea, which is about 20 minutes or 15 minutes drive, but you can see the mountain and also see parts. If something is happening on campus, you can actually see. So that morning, coincidentally, I was actually planning to take a walk to Table Mountain, to Rhodes Memorial. And I was planning to take a walk from Moset Windmill right up to Rhodes Mem and the restaurant, also because my wife, even though she comes from South Africa, had not been there. So it's often the case that when foreigners in a country tend to visit and explore the country more than locals. But also because for the past 3 years, I was in Senegal working as head of publications in Codesria, in a place that was so dry. And my children have grown up in Senegal for the past 3 years in a place where there is very little greenery. So for the past years, they've grown up without actually seeing parts of Table Mountain. So that morning, I was actually planning to go to Table Mountain. And as we always do, we check the news, and then we received news that there was a fire on the mountain, and that was between 9 to 10, a very small flame. And then by midday, it wasn't just a fire, it had become a flame and a mega fire. By afternoon, when I was about to sit down, because this began to change our plans. By afternoon, when I started sitting down, to eat, and friends wanted to come over, we started getting the sad news that the fire was now encroaching upon campus, and the fire was beginning to threaten to catch building. The first thing we thought about was the engineering building, because, the University of Cape Town, because it is part of lots of global research projects, also has lots of, toxic chemicals in tests and labs. So many people get worried every time there's a fire that, the engineering building is going to catch fire. But interestingly, we then learned that and began to receive photos and videos that fire had caught some buildings, but fire was actually burning down by 3:30, burning down the African Studies Library. Yeah, this was such shock. It was such shock. And I think everybody felt numb. And like I've described already, that I felt like I died, I felt like I died on that day. When you see the African Studies Library in flame, because fire is a particular kind of substance. I mean, when fire is different from water. You know, when there's a flood, you can actually after see, you know, what's going on. But when fire only gives you debris after, and fire consumes in such a way that you kind of recognize you can only rebuild and move on, you know, into something else. It actually melts it. It's a kind of dissipates it completely. And that's what happens. And then the shock is also, you have to look at the context, you know. Just a few weeks before, we were having lots of debates about the university, and there were lots of fights, you know, people writing about the university and the newspapers, people resigning from different parts of the university, you know. And just before that, before the start of the year, students have been protesting for fees, you know. And that weekend on Saturday, the Johannesburg General Hospital caught fire, also the cancer ward. And that very night, the offices of the Zondo Commission, which is researching corruption, you know, into the country, there was also burgled. So the last thing we wanted is to wake up, you know, and have fire on the mountain and the university catching fire. So that's also the shock, you know, from everyone, that how much more can we take? Also at a time when we are trying to convince the world to give us vaccines, you know. So that all of this you have to put in this context. So we all got shocked, and lots of people got depressed, and we are still trying to, you know, recover from it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. How does this fire affect you as a scientist, social scientist at the university?
Yeah, look, the university, like I said a few days ago, that if one speaks specifically about the damage, you know, that's happened with the African Studies Library. The library is the heart of the university. The library is the university, you know. Of course, there are people, there's lots of other things, you know, but the library is the university. And you have to remember that Cape Town is also part of the birthplaces of the Rhodes Must Fall movement, and that the reactivation of the decolonization movement, you know, on this continent, knowledge decolonization on this continent happened, you know, in this place. And when you see a library that that is named, you know, I mean, to call it the African Studies Library is great. I mean, it's got one of the best collections on the continent, as we've already read, you know, over 80,000, you know, books, you know, or pamphlets, you know, on the continent, you know, either written from the continent by people from on the continent or from outside the continent. When you see a place with over 35, a collection of 35,000, 3,500 movies, you know, films, African films go up in flames. I mean, you cannot think, but, you know, why? You ask yourself why, especially as a scholar. Why did this fire go around and picking many buildings? It picked this building, you know. you begin to think all sorts of things in your mind, but it really, it really, in a way, deactivates you. It really demotivates you, you know, and it pushes you to begin to ask lots of questions, you know, about it. And also many other buildings caught fire, you know, the maths part of the maths building, part of the biology building, the alumni building. So you had student residences like Fuller Hall, like Smuts Hall. So you have students' lives who have been destabilized, people who have already been destabilized by COVID, which means that the academic project and the knowledge project is disrupted. Professors have to deal with the trauma of this, students have to deal with the trauma of this, and administrators and managers, rather than invest in the academic project, will have to invest, you know, in, you know, divert resources and time, you know, in trying to reconstitute this. So when this happens, as a scientist, I think those are the kinds of things that go on in your mind. How do we continue how do we move on, and how do we work, within these circumstances. And as you would have seen, the university calendar was suspended, for 1 week. First, 48 hours to do an assessment, and then because over 4,000 students had to be evacuated, and then also to do an assessment of the damage, because students really could not return. It also means that the university works overnight to make sure that all of these students are accommodated elsewhere and taken good care of, but also thinking, how do we bring people back onto the campus? This week, people are coming back onto campus, students are returning onto campus, but it means we have to catch up. So already an academic year that has already been extended by COVID lockdowns also get extended. A mindset or our psychologists that have already been depressed by COVID further get depressed, by this experience of fire. So when you ask, how you experience that as a scientist, I mean, the first thing is just the kind of depression that many people feel. Yeah.
Okay. You said that after the first shock, many questions were raised in the scientific community, within the decolonization debate, and what was part of the collection is saved, part of the collection is been burned. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, so it is an ongoing assessment. That's also why I started off by saying I'm not an archivist, I'm not a librarian. So a lot of what we have is what is handed up on to us. I mean, I visited campus last week just to try to see what was going on and what had happened. But this a lot of the reading room, the Jaeger reading room, as it was called, has been gutted by fire. So all the books have been gutted by fire. The pamphlets have been gutted by fire. And also the material that was in the reading room, a lot of the stuff that was stored or being processed in the reading room have been gutted by fire. But luckily, because of there was a fire detection prevention system and detection system, the early fire triggered and prevented the fire from spreading, because it could have been worse. We could have consumed the library completely. But just the African Studies section in the reading room got gutted by fire. But in the vault and the storerooms below, a lot of material has been saved or was not gutted by fire, but because of a lot of, when you stop fire, you use hoses and water, and you have to pour in a lot of water, which then ends up creating its own problems and its own challenges. And over the past weeks, I mean, many people would have received either calls from lots of different associations asking for contributions. You would have received messages over, I think yesterday or the day before yesterday, asking for volunteers. The university community and this town has demonstrated a lot of generosity, towards the university. So over the past 2 days, volunteers, lots of people have volunteered, to save some of that material, take out some of the material in the store, preserve, so they can do an assessment and see what can be preserved and not preserved. But so far, not everything has been lost. And in the weeks ahead, we are going to get a clear assessment about what got lost and what still needs to be saved.
Okay. Thank you. And that's about the academic community, but has the fire and the also implications for a wider, let's say, non-academic audience? Does it? What way?
Yeah. So the fire I describe in 3 ways. So I have 3 things. One is so there's the depression and the sadness.
Yeah.
That's one concept that I used. just the fact that this has happened, but we've also just had too much, and there's just no need to continue pushing it. And the second is just tragedy. That what happened is very tragic, and what has happened is also very, very tragic. And I'll do it in two ways. One is a tragic in terms of just this society itself. I like to say that this town is an archive. This country is an archive, and that if one was to borrow from, I think it's Anne Foster Sterling, who talks about the bare bones of sex or gender, that people's bodies in these towns are already archived with years and years, of suffering and struggle. So already that is tragic in itself, because inscribed into this town and inscribed onto the bodies that are in this town are already these archives of violence that exist. And why I say this fire and the story of this fire is very tragic, because of all the people who are involved in it. Like when we begin to ask why the fire happened and on what caused the fire, we are told that the fire was provoked by what has been framed fragrance, I mean, fragrance is just a term that you use for a person that you, if one was to borrow from another person, Jao Bill, that is just a non-human, somebody whom you can classify as a non-human, and this town is one of the most unequal towns in the world. South Africa is one of the most unequal places in the world, and this town has a really large part of that inequality, which is something that comes as far back, as apartheid, that it was structured, to be in that way. And the sadness is that for whatever reason, because we are still trying to understand, or we will still understand, because there's a legal a case about this. If this fire was caused by a vagrant, it's really sad, because some people say that it was somebody who was trying to cook on the mountain. Somebody was living on the mountain who was trying to cook. And as others say, this was somebody who set the fire. But I mean, we don't know, but the courts are going to tell us, what happened. But whatever we say, it's sad. Mm-hmm. It's sad that in a city that is one of the most expensive cities in the world, and in a place in the mountain that is so sought after, that houses are so expensive, that while a family who calls the police is sitting to have lunch, there's another family that is actually trying to make food by lighting a fire on the mountain. So it's really sad. And all of this is really tragic. How do we get to a point, in the middle of a virus, in the middle of a context where people are asking people to socially distance in different rooms? How is it possible that we have somebody whose only place to make fire is somewhere in the mountain? And we have to ask ourselves, that question to get to this answer. How is it possible that in one of the wealthiest universities on the continent and one of the wealthiest in the world, just next door we have, vagrants, or non-humans, are living? So in that way, I think that people are affected in many different ways. They are affected both in terms of the tragedy of the fire and how it burns. They are affected in terms of the tragedy of the story itself. And I was reading, I think the other day when I was following the news, the person who's been arrested apparently is a Tanzanian national who claims or indicates that he has been here since 2013 and came to enroll for studies at the university. We don't really know, what the story is, but it's a very tragic story. It's a story of disconnections. It's a story of really poor relationships. It's a story of disrupted conviviality. It's a kind of a story of our own ethics towards others and towards this place, and also the fact that there is just so much interest in this fire from all over the world. In itself, very telling. Just last year, Makerere caught fire. And I'm not sure how much we discussed that fire. You know, the University of Makerere did catch fire, and the building was actually a very old antique building, and archives were actually burned, but we didn't have the same discussion, you know. So these are also questions that we have to ask ourselves, you know, and why is it so important? So why are we also putting so much emphasis on this fire and not on the general Johannesburg General Hospital, you know? Last year, for example, one of the presses at the University of Fort Hare, Lovedale Press, a university which was responsible for training lots of the Black people in this country during the colonial era, you know, was being closed down. And these people were struggling, looking for resources and support and solidarity all around the world, you know, to help save this press. And we didn't have the same kind of conversations, you know, around the world. So we have to ask ourselves, you know, what is it that is making us, attracting us, you know, to this place? This is not to not invite people to focus, because I think it's very important that we focus on finding ways of supporting the university, you know, to build this, but we have to put it within a broader system. And that's now the scientific part of it, that the knowledge infrastructure, knowledge production infrastructure on this continent is struggling so badly. And when you see a place that actually has some of that knowledge infrastructure go up in flames, it's actually quite painful for you know, for you. I first actually really saw how a library looked like when I left Cameroon for the University of Botswana in Botswana. The first time I really got into a place where I could have thousands of books, you know, and just read. So when you see a place on this continent where that is in flames, that's quite painful. But then to end, you asked the question, you know, what critical questions, you know, arise. Yeah, the critical question is also like how we continue. The VC has said we can continue, we should continue, and she's really investing in ensuring that we rise again, and that UCT will rise again, the library will rise again, and we should actually take it as an opportunity. And it is how we think about the archives, you know. We have to ask lots of serious questions. When we begin to ask now, what is it in that archive and what is so special in that archive, I think it helps us to begin to think about how we continue. How do we build an archive? How do we build an archive where the greatest collection in that archive is perhaps a collection from a place written by people in Zambia, rather than one of the oldest books that we actually can obtain, you know, from Holland. You know, how do we begin to build archives, and what does it mean to rebuild an archive? Because also an archives, I think, is not a sedimented place. An archives is a kind of an open space where people come to read all sorts of material. It also has a particular kind of power, but it should allow people to be able to come in and read. So, and what does it mean to intentionally build an archives? What does it also mean to build an archives in a time of decolonization? What does it mean to build an archives that is not framed around patriarchal ideas of what needs, you know, to be privileged? I think those kinds of issues currently need to be raised. And what does it mean to build an archive when one takes on Mudimbe's critique of colonial library, you know, into consideration? I think there are many questions, you know, to raise. Sorry.
So, and there are many questions to discuss. And then you ended with the politics of archiving and building archives, which is very relevant, I think, for the continent now. And for UCT especially. I mean, it also opens doors, opportunities to discuss things, how to build further. I would like to open the floor to the audience. Are there questions? People can raise a hand and then we will unmute. Yes, Fred. You unmute? Still muted.
1 moment. He needs to accept.
Huh.
Or he can unmute.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes.
How can we help?
Yeah, I sometimes say that, you know, we are also eager to help, that we are always looking for ways to help, you know. Yeah, I think that one, like I said, the city has actually, people in this town and corporations have actually really been generous and kind to the university, both in helping to put out the fires, but in supporting the accommodation of students, in feeding students and moving them back into campus, and also now in supplying material, you know, for moving people. And the university has set up um, a platform to support. There is a platform actually to support. I will put the link, you know, on the chat, where you can actually support either financially or in kind, you know. But I think that that's one way to do it, that we need to actually provide the support to the university in trying to rebuild this. The other, I think we need to do another kind of support, which is trying to repatriate some of the stuff that was taken out of the continent and be brought back to the continent, so that we can actually archive them. That's the project that Phil Winsar and his group with on restitution and restoration, that having, when an archive has been gutted by fire like this, it's important that we find ways in rebuilding this archive that we bring back some of these materials. So whatever you collected from the continent, and it's time to bring it back and to donate it, so that we can find this home, you know, to put it in. And this, I think UCT has a space where you can put some of this material. And I think lastly is just like the kinds of intellectual conversations that we need to undertake, you know, about archiving, you know, what it means, you know, to archive, what it means to build archive, what it means to be thinking this, you know, on the continent. And if I should add lastly, just maybe supporting the knowledge infrastructure on the continent. The knowledge infrastructure needs a lot of support. And what we should do is find ways of supporting this through the different projects that are actually doing work on knowledge production on the continent. So what I mean is we have to make sure that we support UCT quite well. We have to make sure that we support Lovedale. We have to make sure that we support Makerere. We have to make sure that we support all of these places where building knowledge infrastructure is challenging. So we don't make it just a one-off thing, you know. I know that people are running lots of projects in the Netherlands and and here, projects to save archives, projects to build institutions. I think those kinds of projects, we need to support them more as we give our support to the university.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Are there more questions? On the politics of archiving. Yeah, Bart.
Yes. First, if you, Dr. Fu, if you forward the link to that support platform to us, then we'll share it. We'll send a mail after our session here to everybody who participated. We'll also report on our own platform about this session, and so spread the word about these support things. I have going back to the fire itself, I was puzzled by seeing pictures, aerial pictures from the fire, and then you actually see that the library is in the midst of a whole small village, actually an academic village. Is there any speculation or idea on how it's possible that this library that's in the midst burns down while all the other facilities, well, there's water damage and so on, but they're all still there?
Yeah, when you see the area photo, you think that it's witchcraft, and then you also ask, like, why does this fire choose the African Studies Library, you know? And as somebody was also saying that he was talking to some firefighters, and they were making a joke that when you look at the campus, when you look at the mountain, it's the alien trees that survived. All of the indigenous trees got consumed by fire. And I was saying, like, this is a metaphor of the challenge that the knowledge production infrastructure faces, even to nature, you know. And it's you know, Cape Town, or South Africa, or the Western Cape in particular, is a fire-prone zone. I think we hear a lot about fires in California, in Australia, you know. But if you remember, in 2017, there was a big mega fire here in Knysna, which gutted in our whole community. So every year, there are actually lots of mega fires here, natural fires, but there are also man-made fires, some by accident and some deliberately, and sometimes a combination of both. But we also have to take into consideration that the fire season is, well, I think December to April, I think, is the fire season, I think, in the Western Cape. So the Western Cape is in the summer, and I think elsewhere it's during the dry winters. And temperatures really it gets very dry. Several years back, it was a drought, as you may have known. But also, at the same time, we have very strong winds. I think February has like some of the strongest winds. And if you look at the rescue efforts, also the city actually deployed so many resources to rescue the fires. But nature, when nature takes its course, you know, like you can see this fire up, the wind blows the fire, flames, the flake, they drop, you know, in certain spaces, and then some of those places, you know, catch fire. So nature drove the fire after. Strong winds drove the fire. And then fate, you know. Like I say, African knowledge infrastructures or production really need an uphill task, so they always face challenges. And it seems like the fire decided that this place of decolonization needs to go down. Yes, Miriam. I see Miriam and Pauline have their hands up.
Okay.
Hello, Divine.
Hi.
Thank you very much for your repose. And I have a question. Are there also artworks have been in fire? Because I know in the collection of the library, there were also of very old Black artists, their latest works and their begin works from the 1950s. Is there already a list from which artworks are? Do you know about that, or a
There's
person?
not, the library is constituting a list right now. They're doing an assessment, and the library is going to colleagues, I mean, really hardworking colleagues in the library. On the UCT campus, they are amazing colleagues in the library. They're currently doing an assessment and also moving the stuff from the basement and also from the vaults, and constituting a list of what has been lost. But everything that was in the Jaeger reading room,
Yeah, so
both
that
arts, books, benches, tables, lights, everything that was in the Jaeger living room got gutted by fire.
okay.
And that's like over, I think over 70 to 80,000, 85,000, you know, books and pamphlets. I mean, when I was in Rhodesia, we were trying to donate. I was trying to drive a project to push my organization to donate books, to add to that collection. I mean, any a body who made a contribution that was in the library, the reading room, that was holding books in the reading room, on the shelves in the reading room, that got at fire. But then the special collection, the African Studies collection, which is below, like the Bleak collection and many others that was below, or lots of family collections and donations. The ANCs also collect, some of the ANCs archives are also stored there. All of those, that stuff, some of those stuff that was also in the basement. And then we also have a lot of stuff that was digitized, but not all. Like the colleagues in the library have indicated, the Vice Chancellor has also indicated that some of this was digitized, but everyone is waiting for colleagues in the library to complete the assessment. And once that process is completed, because currently they are taking out stuff, also seeing what can be restored, what cannot be restored, what can be saved, what cannot be saved, what has been damaged. And then at the end of that process, they will, I think, make a report to everyone. But already there are requests from many colleagues and many different centers, like APC, the Center for Public Archives. There are drives now asking anyone who took photos or have copies of photos or copies of manuscripts to deposit them in several deposits, which so people can begin to try to reconstitute, just in case, they don't find stuff.
Yeah, in the Netherlands also, that's the historical archival organization who started that with a lot of people. And then Divine, is there also contact with the library in Alexandria?
I think colleagues would know that. The university is actually well connected across the continent. Yeah. I mean, that's what makes it sad, because they've invested so much effort over the past years to try to build a Pan-African space and a global space. Somebody's work, like we are told that a colleague who put together the film collection just retired. So all her life, she's been putting this together, and in one day or in a few hours, all of that is done. So I think there are connections across, and you remember we had the Timbuktu project also here, with Shamil JP. The institution is doing a lot, to connect across the continent.
Yeah, okay. Well, take care.
I see Miriam.
Miriam.
Yes, thanks Divine and also the organizers, ZAM, for taking us into this. And I agree, Divine, that now we give a lot of attention to UCT, but there's so much else. But probably then this might be a chance to really put forward that agenda that you are pushing throughout your talk, that we need decolonization, we need better knowledge infrastructures being built in Africa, all over the continent. South Africa somehow is an exception because it's one of the places where knowledge infrastructure is quite well developed, also only in some areas, of course. But so it could also be a chance to take this as how sad it is, but to put that now really on the agenda, because we have to do that. There's many words. In the meantime, we have published quite some articles, but real action to change the relations of power in knowledge production has not been undertaken. So is there in South Africa, one of the countries in Africa, I would say, where academia is very much fighting for decolonization, and also due to its history of inequality? Is there now someone in UCT who takes this up and will indeed make it into a big public debate? And instead of only donating books or a bit of money, we should donate a different hierarchy in this world.
Yeah. Thank you, Miriam. And I think that was the second contribution or the third contribution that I think I listed, that to keep this debate ongoing. I think over the past years, UCT has actually been at the center of lots of work on archives. Caroline Hamilton's work on the APC has been very crucial. There is now a center for also the archives with the SAN, which is headed by June Bam, which is at the African Studies, the Center for African Studies, CAS. And then the colleagues in English literature, Christopher Omar and Kwesi Kize, who have been leading a project on the Black archives, funded by the Mellon Foundation. And also at HUMA, what we are doing is also, we're heading a project on, it's called Knowledge Activism, but the project is mainly focused on strengthening knowledge infrastructure, across the African continent. So this year we are doing 54 country study on the state of knowledge production or publishing and archiving and the knowledge infrastructure. And then from 2022, 2023 onwards, we are investing in just trying to strengthen different knowledge platforms with the support of funders. Of course, this year we are funded by the Open Society Foundation, but these are things to do. And I think that Miriam also with where you are located, strategically also with the projects that you've done from, Connections, Voice for Thought, and looking into the future, what we should be thinking into the future as we are entering the era of data, and we are entering the era of what we call the fourth industrial revolution or artificial intelligence, where data is really key and where archives are really central. It's what archives you have that is going to determine what power you would have. And what power you have to define what archives, that's going to determine what kind of personhood you will be in the future. And when we talk about decolonizing AI and decolonizing archives, it is these kinds of debates that you're talking about, but also this action to invest in building infrastructure. When you have a press like Lovedale that is closing down, which means that we have to then curate knowledge elsewhere in the UK, or in the Netherlands, in the US, it's got serious consequences for what it means for people in the Eastern Cape to define themselves. When you have a place like Cape Town, which is going to lose its archives, or have an archive without many voices, from this locale, from this place, it also means that it redefines what it means for them to be full persons tomorrow. It's got a whole politics, and perhaps it is at this time, like you say, we should push this through collaborations, through debates, through asking that people should actually invest resources in these projects. And as I was telling Lawrence the other, last week, so there is the project of ensuring that we donate money to UCT, which you should do. I'm hoping that after this, you donate lots of millions to UCT. It would make me very happy. It will make the Vice Chancellor very happy. It will make many other people very happy. And that you do not only donate to build, to feed people, but to build knowledge infrastructure, to sponsor students. A few months back, students were asking for colonial debts, or historical debts, or inherited debts, because many of them cannot go to school because they owe generations and generations of debts, to pay. I think there are many ways, that we should do that. So that's one. But Miriam, this project of intervention is really key, that we don't let this momentum go. Like I said, Makerere was out just in September. Then we now have this, we have Lovedale closing. Now coronavirus is going to end, and we don't know how many universities are going to lose their knowledge infrastructure and their archiving or libraries, you know. So we need to make sure that we invest in safeguarding that. Then on the other side is also direct interventions that should fund science itself. Because I think one of the other tragedies is like how many universities actually have a department of fire science? How many universities? That if fire is such a critical issue in this region, why aren't we investing so deeply in studying fires? You know, in December, a township here, Masipul Mulele, got gutted by fire. Over 1,000 houses were burnt, households. Those are the places where people meet, where people grow up. Those are the places where, you know, people marry, places where people love, people read, where people worship. Just gone up in fire. So the actions are multiple. And Miriam, we should do what we can do as academics, and ask the people who fund to fund what we do as academics and also support the university with its infrastructure.
Thank you so much. It reminded me, there is you were talking about the Black Archives. In the Netherlands, we also have a small initiative since a few years. It's called the Black Archives, and they are people from African descent who are appropriating more or less the black history of the Netherlands, which is an also interesting movement. And I think they should seek more kind of solidarity with Black archives on the African continent, for instance, or wherever, because it's the same processes are behind this.
Yeah. Solidarity is not just about giving, you know. Solidarity is not just about giving money, you know. It's like you say, it's about lots of connections. And you know, if I might just mention, you know, that fire also happened on the eve after we had 1 week of the Chauvin case, the Derek Chauvin case in the US. So already it was such a heavy week already. Just about what it meant, you know, to be Black, and what it meant, you know, to be human, and what it meant to be part of a state or part of a system, or to be acknowledged. So that when people say that it was very heavy, you really have to take all of these things into consideration to understand how heavy it was, you know, to be on that Sunday. And Sunday here is a special day, like many other places. I'm in the Netherlands, in Japan, many other places. Sundays is a day of conviviality, meeting family, having to relax so that you can surrender yourself to capital, you know, on Monday, you know. So it's quite special. And when you have your Sunday gutted like that, you know, so much of it, you know, is gone. So when we think about the weight, and when we think about solidarity, I think we need to take all of this into consideration. People are distraught, people are depressed, people are worried, but also infrastructures are disrupted, are worried, you know. So take all of that into consideration and then provide support.
One practical point, you mentioned a few knowledge platforms and centers connected to UCT that are. Could you list them for us?
Wow, I can provide you a long list, but the most immediate is to donate to the university. That's very important. The university has a platform where it's centralized how all of this is done, so that they can coordinate it. Is important also because it gets acknowledged, and the university is also coordinating the process of hiring volunteers. But there are also, like I said, projects that are being run. You'll find a lot of it on social media, especially from the APC, the Archive and Public Culture Center, with Caroline Hamilton. But the library itself, with its which is executive director, are also coordinating efforts. And my recommendation is also that we we check UCT website just to see what is being published and what's being updated, you know, on the news. I think that's very important. We access the library site so that we can actually get directly with people in the library and talk with people in the library and see how to support people in the library. They have an amazing team. I have to underline that. And really people who are dedicated and committed, you know, to knowledge production. I haven't seen people like that. I would say connect to those people quite well. We can always help you. Our job as HUMA, as an institute that is focusing on the humanities and on Pan-African knowledge production, is also to ensure that this conversation is local, but at the same time transcends, that we think more broadly and connect more with issues on the continent and partners who are focusing on Africa, you know, across the world. And
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions or remarks or reflections or Fred?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fred.
Well, I'm a bit of the down-to-earth department today, because I would like to know, was the university insured? Cape Town is not a very rich town. Maybe what are they going to pay for, and what can be done by others? Well, you say you want to build up a new archive. So I can imagine that you don't only want to restore what was there, but you want to make a new beginning with a black archive or with some digital whatever. So can you tell me some more about that? What is needed? From my standpoint, I would like to do something to also to show some solidarity.
Yeah.
But I would like to have it more practical, because just sending money to some bank number in that I don't know what is being done and what is already being done and what can be done more than maybe. I think, was it Bart or Pauline that said you don't have to, let's say, only restore what was lost, but you can make a new start.
Yes.
And even make it better than it already was.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you very much, Fred. So I'll answer in several ways. The first one is like, if you can donate to the university, great. I think that's really important. That because there is the university is centrally coordinated, and also we are living in we are working or living in a well-resourced university and also well-resourced town. So that's really important. So UCT, like the VC Vice Chancellor has indicated, is insured. But like she says, you know, insurance will not bring back what we've lost. No, the amount of insurance will bring back what has been lost. So that's also very important. Yeah. Then secondly, I think the VC has also said that we should take this as an opportunity, that it's a loss. And that was the third thing I said: depression, sadness. Then I also said tragedy. And the last I said hope. So we should take this as a hopeful moment. And like the VC has pushed this optimism, which is very difficult at certain moments, that let's push this optimism, let's rebuild this space, but let's continue into the future. It's an opportunity to rebuild or to build new things or to think new things. And we should invest in that. And that's also why I'm saying the third half of it, that apart from donating money, what we need to do is to try to support projects that are strengthening knowledge production and the knowledge infrastructure, you know, on the continent. And I think that actually when the VC says that we will rise again and there is a silver lining, And that is the silver, some parts of the silver lining. Let us recollect archives. It means that people should resend. People should donate the archives, you know, to the library. There are lots of archives that people have collected across the continent that are staying in different places. But we have an infrastructure where you can actually place that material. It's important, you know, to donate a lot of that archives. We are also saying that people should invest in projects that are thinking the archives and researching the archives. And we have many of those projects on the continent. We have them out of the continent. Just in Europe, I mean, I know, ZAM magazine is doing a lot of work. You have the African Studies Center in Leiden doing a lot of work. I know Miriam's project with A Voice for Thought and the connections and disconnections, and we're currently also discussing how to continue with that. I also know Miriam and colleagues are working with many collaborators, you know, on the continent, and I think if we find ways of strengthening that, even Lovedale Press, which is just next door, you know, at the University of Fort Hare, are also looking for support. You have Makerere, which is also looking for support. I think if we find a framework to put resources that are also different from supporting the university. So we provide support financially to build the infrastructure, but we also provide support to be archives and to think archives.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Divine. You sent a link in the chat, in the chat, and apparently there's a lot more information about the emergency fund and the fire at UCT, and you can even post questions. I understood. So that's really great for us who have more practical questions. Thank you so much, Divine, for also your plea to think and to reconsider how we can support the knowledge infrastructure in Africa. Let's say more, decolonized Black kind of archives. You made us think, you made us reflect, and that's very good, I think. All of you who have been listening, thank you so much for your presence. It's heartwarming to see these people log in and devote an hour midday to this discussion. Thank you so much. And then I think we will send around an email with some addresses.
Yes.
So then people can go on further and